Hello there, and welcome to the next installation. I believe, is this the last one? I'm not sure. But anyway, regardless of that, welcome to another video on EDEF 607. My name is Tyler, and today we have a whole new topic. Before I get into that, one thing you know is that I'm sick today, so if I sound a little stuffed up, that's why, and my head hurts and I kind of lose concentration, that's the other explanation. So, if I die today from this sickness, then let it be documented that I did it for something that I loved. So anyway, there are really two readings for this week. One was the Grading Education by Rothstein, and the other one was the 50 Myths book. And that was just the epilogue. In Rothstein, we were talking about there are three main chapters, 6, 7, and 8, that we're going to be addressing. And so anyway, there are three topics really that we're going to talk about today. One is NAEP. We're going to talk about what that's about. Then we have accreditation, ways to keep schools accountable, and then also the federal government involvement in education. See, does it have a place in it? Should it be more to the states, or do they really have a legitimate claim to running education? So anyway, I thought I'd get talking about NAEP real quick. And so really quick introduction what NAEP is, sorry I'm going to probably say NAP a lot, is that it was a new way of doing assessments for students. And it's a little bit different than what we have traditional testing where it just teaches reading, writing, and arithmetic. Where in NAEP, it's all about testing a more wider and more broad sense of curriculum. And so here on chapter 99, here it says, in 1949 book, Tyler had recommended that educational evaluation should not rely exclusively on standardized test scores, but must appraise the behavior of students since it is changes in these behaviors which is sought. And so this basically means that besides just the plain multiple choice standardized testing, they want to do more observational assessment and see, not just, if you get A, B, C are correct, it's more of, how you perform well with others or, how well you do with certain tasks. And sorry, excuse me, I'm going to take a little break from my nose. Okay, so anyway, now you're thinking, okay, what are some of these curriculum that NAEP is talking about? And so if you look further in the book, it is on page 108, it talks about the 8 basic principles or goals that NAEP is talking about. And actually, I'm going to list some of them. There is appreciation of the arts and literature, preparation for skilled employment, social skills and work ethic, citizenship and community responsibility, physical health and emotional health. And so in previous weeks, we've already talked about, how can we measure this? How are we able to make sure they know what good citizenship is? How do we know what good work ethic is? And so it provides examples throughout the book talking about, for example, with good citizenship, it talks about how would you deal with this certain situation and policy, or how often have you contacted your congressman to see stuff like that. That's a way of observing. It's more, like I said, it's more peer review, more watching you do stuff rather than just taking a pure test. And this is actually a big criticism of NAEP, was they said it was way too broad, is that we need to really tighten our focus on just reading and math. And so that's the big thing with NAEP. I only have one real criticism of NAEP, is that it's the main criticism that it gets is, how do you measure what the kids know? How are you able to measure that? And also, if you're observing someone, there might be some level of subjectivity. It can't be completely objective. Regardless of whatever your beliefs are about standardized testing and multiple choice tests, they are completely objective, and it measures whether you know it or you don't. But for just observational, it could be completely different, where, if, for example, you measure work ethic. If you have someone who's extremely hardworking, they just are go-getters the whole time, their definition of a hard worker might be different than someone else's. And so when they're observing somebody and they're not displaying the work ethic they think is deemable, then they might give them a failing score. That's just an example. It can be done many different ways, but that's just one thing I see. So moving on, we are going to be talking about accreditation and accountability. And it says here on page 125, it says, accreditation is mostly a peer review process, and as much as it is responsible for a large, unheralded culture of continuous improvement in many ways, schools nationwide. Just talking about how nowadays, basically schools are measured by accountability and accreditation, and how will you get your kids to pass the SOL test. And so this goes back into assessment, is that, what should we decide to test on? And so, for example, you have a school here on the right who is not passing, their student is failing math, and then you have another school here that's doing extremely well. That accreditation basically is like a grade to the school saying, letting parents know, let the public know, this school is doing something right. They are teaching their kids what they need to know, and they're doing it profitably, and they're also doing it effectively. And so I think accreditation, in a way, is good. Now, I know some people might say, well, that's just unfair because, you have inner city schools that, they may not have the resources, and they struggle because they don't have that support as much. This is true, but I do think there is some way we need to make sure and let people know, like, hey, you need to improve. And I've met a lot of teachers in inner city. They are fantastic teachers, but it's just they don't have the same support as you would have like in a suburban school where you have higher economic families. And so accreditation is a big thing. And so then point 3, this is going to be a short video today, I believe. That way you don't have to worry about taking so much time out of your day to look at this. You can actually just, see for 10 minutes and then be good. So talking about, and this is really the big issue, is deciding who should be responsible for education. Should it be up to the states or should it be up to the federal government? And honestly, federal government and state government power, who has what power, how much of it, when, and for what purpose, has been going on since the foundation of our country. It's never going to stop. Even today, you have small government people, you have big government people. That's always going to be a sense of debate about what people think would be best. And so talking about education in this standpoint is that a lot of maybe back like 2000s, late 90s conservatives would say we need to introduce No Child Left Behind. We need to make sure that everyone's on the same level and same standard as everyone else is. Regardless of what state they're from, they have those same standards they have to meet. And so on page 143, it talks about the accountability system. We suggest the mechanism for ensuring that schools produce satisfactory outcomes in the 8 goals areas established by democratic decision making. Assumes that such accountability should be a state, not federal responsibility. Not only do we have a constitutional tradition of state control of education, but the failure of No Child Left Behind has made it apparent that in this large country, the U.S., Congress and Department of Education are too distant to micromanage school performance. And so that's the big debate. That's the state argument, saying that, the federal government is so out of touch with the individual states and communities, then they just need to stay out of it. They don't know what they're talking about. They may know what they're talking about, but it doesn't mean that they actually know what they're talking about. And so that's the big state saying that, government's way too big and that the states need to control this. And where I do see merit in that, I agree completely that I think states need to become more involved, where it's mainly federal government at this point. I think the states need to reclaim some of that responsibility and power back. But then you have the federal government's argument saying, well, hey, who's going to pay for all this? We have a lot of these programs that help kids, IDEA policy with IEPs. How are you also supposed to pay for it? Are you going to increase taxes? And that's the main thing that the federal government gets, because they have so much money, so much resources to provide for education, that if it came to the states, they would say, you'd have to increase your taxes. And so that just, both sides are just going back and forth, deciding what would be best. And I think where both sides have merit, I do believe the states need to have more control over what they're doing and not have Big Brother kind of like overlooking, what you're doing at all given times. I think the federal government is important in certain cases. I think, but with educating our kids and knowing the demographics, knowing our communities, I think the states and local governments should be way more involved than the federal government in this particular area. All right, so that is actually the end of the Rothstein book, and just want to talk quick about the 50 Myths. It was just basically the epilogue, and I just want to kind of tell you what I got from that, just like 1 minute, just synopsis. Basically, just what I got from 50 Myths was that whether or not you believe in standardized testing, whether you believe in portfolio assessment, state government involvement, federal government involvement, whether or not you believe in charter schools, private schools, public schools, whether you believe that we should be more traditional education or more progressive and more new age education. It's all to your interpretation. You know, it's your classroom. You decide what you want to do with it. You are, you know, of course you respect your students, but really that is your basic domain. You can mold your classroom into what you want it to be, because no one else can do it like you can. Every teacher brings something to the table, regardless of their beliefs. And we all just have to listen to what people say. Now, of course, it doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but we at least listen to what people have to say, regardless of whatever myths come up. So anyway, that wraps up this video. I want to thank you for taking the 11.5 minutes to sit here and hear me talk. But anyway, hopefully I will see you all again, and you have a great day. Bye.